Welcome to the Word Import Wizard video. What is it we're going to talk about this video, Hedvig?
Well, the Word Import Wizard.
Yes.
We're going to go through it and show you all the fun new features and how they work.
Exactly. In general, just make sure that you know what all the buttons do. And of course, I'm joined here by Hedvig, the one and only, because she's a wizard. And also because she's been testing and working a lot with the Word Import Wizard. So who better to have joining me here in the studio? Let's get on with the show.
Let's go.
Step 1, have a document to put your content into, right? And so the first thing we'll do here, just to take it really from the get-go, is to create a quick document. So we'll go here and we will add a document. And it's just, funnily enough, we also have an import from Word button right here. What a coinkydink that we're taking you all the way through this process. So let's go, shall we? Import from Word. We create a new document. We're going to put it in a category, and that category is going to be this category because it's testing and we don't care. So we're going to call it HNS import because Hedvig and Stefan. It doesn't really need a shortcode, so we will open up the word import. So now it's created the document in the background, and now we can upload the file. Hedvig?
Absolutely. So first of all, we want to actually select the document. So we can click the upload button in the middle of the screen and then select our manual. And then we can see the name of the manual that we've chosen. And now we actually have two options here. The first is quick imports, which is like the legacy importer. It imports with a set of predefined options, and it's just quick and easy. But if you want more control and you actually want to start playing with the Word Import Wizard, then we want to click on Advanced Imports. So let's click on Advanced Imports.
Let's do it.
Which brings us to the Configure Headings and Styles menu.
Exactly.
So we have a bunch of things to go through here. But first of all, we can actually click the Update Structure button.
Exactly. And just super quick, the main functionality of the system, besides a lot of new functions that you get, is the fact that we don't just import the Word document straight into web manuals. We stop you here at like a middle station where you can make a lot of choices and you can see the impact of those choices. The point is that you will see your page structure and your table of content before the document is actually imported. And this will give you a much easier and quicker result without having to change the document afterwards. So now we can make our choices, and Hedvig will go through all of those, I promise. But we can make our choices, for example, defining what headers should be what. And after we've done that, then we can see how will the table of content structure be. Meaning that you will have a very good inkling if your document is correct even before you import it. A lot faster results, and hopefully it will feel a lot better to a lot of you. So, and that's also why we have to update the structure, because we will not be doing that in the background while you are making changes. As soon as you make a change, the structure will stop and it will say you need to update it again, just like you see here, to avoid spending processing power for nothing. So when you're ready, you've applied your changes, then we update the structure. It'll load for a short while, and now we'll see our page structure. So these are the pages we will have in the system. And if we go over here instead to table of content, we will see that we now have a table of content already pre-built that we can drill into. And if we are happy with this structure because it fits the table of content we already have, well, then there should be a very high chance of success when we actually import, right? So with that, let's move on and look at the headings.
So, Stefan, should we start with the headings?
Yes, let's do that. So, step 1 is, of course, to expand the headings menu, like this.
And here we have a very fun feature, which is that our system detects the heading styling in Word. And we can actually remap or map the headings to what we want them to be in web manuals. So, let's say we have heading 3, 4, 5. We want all of those to be heading 2s in web manuals, but we don't want to deal with, going into the Word document and actually making changes. We can just do that here in these nifty, handy little menus.
Exactly. So we just pull all the headings that are available and let you choose how do you want to map that in web manuals, which is really powerful. And what does the page breaking do?
Well, the page break, kind of does what it says on the tin, but if you check the checkbox, that will add a page break before the heading that you applied it to. So if you apply it to heading 2, so you will have a page break before every heading 2 in your document.
Perfect. So now we know the headings we had in Word, and of course that comes in very nifty, considering that sometimes people create their own headings from styles and they're not using the native Word headings, and that really helps. So now you can choose, well, I was actually not using some of the standardized Word, I was just using a style we created 2 years ago, and you can actually map that in and say that is a heading 2. Also, of course, we'll be looking at this a little bit later, but if you are importing straight into a chapter, then you don't need your heading 1s. Then you could actually map your heading 1s to become heading 2s if you so desire. Let's jump in and look at styles. Just for aesthetics, I'm going to close the headings menu bit by like this, and it's mostly because we don't want it to extend. You can have multiple open at the same time, but we don't want to get squished by the menus from up top. So yeah, that's a primary reason why we are closing the menus as we're moving along. You can choose to have all of them open in a scroll list if you so desire. But Hedvig, what is going on here?
Yes, so this is the menu where we can configure the styles. So what happens is that we detect the styles from the original Word file, and we can either choose what style we want to use, or we can actually just take the style straight out of the Word document and use it in our web manuals document.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of settings that is very customizable.
Let's jump in and have a look, shall we?
So, for example, for the header style that we have in Word, we can either select that it's supposed to be the same as a style that we've already created in web manuals. By selecting any of the ones in the list. We can also add a new style. Let's say that our headers have a specific styling in Word and we want to keep that in web manuals. We can actually add a style here in this menu. This requires you to be an admin, and you also need the designer to be activated on your site.
Yes, and before we move on, if we click it, of course you'll see everything that is connected to this style from Word, and then of course you need to give it a new name so you can find it in the future.
Yes. And it also says ignore here, which doesn't mean that no styling will be applied. Yes. What will happen is that if you have a red text in your Word document, you leave ignore and then you import it to web manuals, you'll actually still get the red text styling as an inline HTML style, as long as you have your custom source styles enabled.
Exactly, and you'll allow for text colors, size, and all that in the source.
Yes.
One important thing to mention is just the value of you not having to recreate all this styling again. Everything you had can actually be pulled in now. And if you are really happy with this red text, because it's the perfect tint of red, and I want to have that in web manuals as well, then you can create it and reuse it all over in all of your other documents as well, which is of course is elevating the functionality from Word as well, because in Word you would need to create a new styling for other documents if you so desire to reuse them, especially for other people. This style can be used by all. So in general, we are elevating the way that we're working with styling of content, and we hope you enjoy it. So now let's go in and have a look at other, if I can close this, at other settings.
Yes, so for the other settings, we can open that menu and take a look what we have. So the first 3 checkboxes here is actually stuff that we've had before, but we still want to include it because it's great. So the first one that we have is leave a blank page at the start of the document. So what it does is it actually leaves a blank page at the start of the document, so you don't have to go in and add that manually. Exactly. We also have ignore all margins, which removes all the margins that you may have in your original Word file, because our web documents have a slightly different format to the Word document, and this just eliminates any extra work that you need to do.
And in the old days of working with Word, people would press tab if they needed to move content in. Yeah. That comes in as a margin. And if you don't want to do that, as Hedvig says, if you want to use our structure now and have it proper left aligned, then we can simply clean up all that for you.
Yes. And the third one we have is remove all empty paragraphs. And what it does is that it just automatically removes all the empty paragraphs and enter presses that you have made in your Word document.
Exactly. And just before we move on, same thing, old way of working in Word. I've written something and I need to go to next line. We always press enter twice. That leaves that empty line, which looks fine in Word, but we have the automatic extra spacing. So if that is on, then that's going to be quite a lot of space. So instead, we'll just remove that extra space for you and you'll have a nice and tight page.
Yes. And something that's new is actually remove all empty lines, which is similar to paragraphs. We're just eliminating the extra space that doesn't really need to be there anymore.
Correct.
For something that's a little more exciting is replace table of contents with table of content module. So what this does is that in your Word document, if you have a proper Word module table of contents, we will actually detect that. And on import, if you check this, you will replace it with our own table of contents module.
Exactly. Saving you the time. So we can detect it, we can find it, and you'll just have our fully automatic table of content instead as soon as the document is imported.
Yes, and we have a similar functionality to this, but with the list of affected pages instead. This works slightly differently because there is no list of affected pages module in Word. But what we do is if you have a heading that says list of affected page, along with a table underneath it, that will also be detected by us and it will be replaced with our own list of affected pages module.
Exactly. And of course, this is a little bit more feeling our way around because if you have the Word functionality for TOC, it's quite easy for us to find and recognize. This, as Hedvig says, it's a little bit more on we're going out on a limb here and taking a chance. But hopefully, in most cases, we'll get it right. And if you have a table, then you don't have to spend time setting up your table of content or your list of affected pages. It will just be there. But of course, remember to check them and make sure they're long enough and all the content is there.
And for one of my favorite features is the guest headings for TOC. So in your Word document, maybe you haven't really used those heading styles. You've just written text, said 1.1 heading. Now that's, of course, we read it as a heading, but the system wouldn't know that that's a heading. So what we're doing with this feature is that we are guessing or detecting where we find this text in our document. Exactly. So if you have the written text, we will try to see that and we will replace that with our own headings or add the styling of the heading.
Exactly. And it boils down to, prior to this, you would have to, if you didn't have proper headings, but if you'd numbered it just with the styling, if you wanted the best result, you would need to go through your Word document and mark every heading as an actual heading. Now we say, well, it's often the same structure. So what if we give it a shot? So if this comes out bad, and the trick is you can actually do it quite snugly because you can choose to guess the headings and then you can simply update the structure. And if the data comes out or the TOC comes out the way you expect, then you know that the system actually found the correct headings. If not, well, then we need to update them afterwards, of course. But this should really alleviate a lot of time and less work as you are importing a lot of documents.
Right, and that leaves us with one left, which is the use web manuals overflow system to split pages. Yes. And what this does is, we try to detect how much space we actually have left. Like I said before, a Word document format or the style can be different from what we have in web manuals. So what we do here is that we see how much space we actually have left and move content between the pages to actually fill them up and not leave a bunch of empty space at the bottom of the pages.
Exactly. So in general, if we boil it down, if you run with this, as Hedvig says, you use our overflow system and we try to fill out the pages. If you don't, then we'll follow your structure in Word. And if you have a page break, then we will also have a page break.
And that's it for the other settings, I believe.
It is. Before we move on, let's just try something. And as we move in, because we are going to import afterwards. So let's try to activate these two features and see if it actually activates and replaces them as we expect. Good. Let's jump in and have a look at table settings. Now, let's jump in and look at table settings. I'm just going to open it and then Hedvig will start talking. Let's check it out. Boop.
Yes. So here we have a little less, but it's still really good what we got here. So the first one is ignore table margins, which, similar to the ignore all margins from the previous menu, is just doing the same for the tables. So if we have a bunch of different margins, maybe they're not the same throughout the document, we just want to remove all them and start from, the standard. We can do that here. The second one is collapse table borders, which what it does is, when we're importing, we're going to get, by standard, if we're not selecting this, we're going to get a 2-pixel HTML standard border. And if we want to narrow that down and just have the really nice, sleek-looking 1-pixel border, we can do that with the collapse table borders option.
Exactly. In general, it takes the 2 pixels and it puts them on top of each other. It's so simple.
It's so simple. And the last thing we have is regarding the cell paddings. And now we can actually add that right here and from the start before even importing the document. So if we want to add a little bit of padding, give the cell some space, we can add padding right here, and we can add it for the left, the right, the top, and the bottom.
Exactly, and where this really comes into fruition is, of course, primarily for the left padding, where the text meets the left side. They will be touching by a pixel if this is set to 0, but now you can actually define this prior to the import. So you can ensure that, for example, if you had massive margins in your tables before, we can ignore those margins and then we can apply our paddings, just a tiny bit of spacing. And if you want to ensure that there's always a little bit of spacing all the way around, then we set this to, for example, 3 pixels for all sides of every cell. And then your tables will be mint. Now, before we start importing, let's update the structure and see if it's still the same. It's always interesting. It loads for a second, and we still have the same table of content. We might have different pages. I see a few extra pages. It's because we've added settings. There we go. I'm quite certain it's because we added a page break before heading 2, which is what we decided to have here. So with that, let's click the import button and see where this takes us. So now the document was created, it loads for a second, and then you'll see on top says import done, and then we need to click the button to reload. Boop. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have all the pages with all the data, and of course these are the pages. We can also see the table of content. It came in just like we expected. It actually comes in opened as well. And if we go down, I forgot to remove lines or cursors, but it would have removed that, of course, that spacing. But here you can actually see we now have the table of content that we expected to get. This is where I had my own old table of content, and it has now been replaced. All I need to do is update my module, telling it I'm happy, and then it'll be fine. And what are we expecting down here, Hedvig, before we start scrolling?
The list of effective pages.
Yes. Let's see if it did it. Oh, an empty
page.
page. And then, and with the module. So good. It really removes, and it's just removing those little tasks, right? The more we can pull into the system and let the system do for you, the less time you have to spend on it, so you can spend time on the important things instead. Now, I think there's one more thing we wanted to do. We wanted to show where our import buttons are, and then import from a chapter, or import into a chapter as well. So before we move on to the chapter, where can we find these import buttons?
Well, in many places. For example, we can find it in the author menu in the document lifecycle, which we will find import and then from Word. And we can also see it in the settings, which will also say import and from Word.
Exactly. So you have a plethora of ways to import into your document. So finally, before we finish off, let's quickly jump in and see how we can import in from or into a specific chapter instead.
Yes. So Word to Chapter is actually only available on one of the import buttons, which is the one in the navigation menu. So if we click on Pages.
And now we just need to be floated up.
There we go. And we click on Imports at the bottom of the navigation. Right there. And then we have a second option, which is Word to Chapter.
Yes.
So what this does is that we import all the content from a Word document into a newly created chapter in Web Manuals. So important to note is that we are not importing to an existing chapter. We are creating a new chapter consisting of the content from the Word document of our choosing. So if we click on the button, boop, great. And we have the same dialog box as before, so we will select our document.
We can grab the same one.
Yeah. And like before, we also have quick import as an option, but for this we want to click advanced import. And here we have now an additional menu, which is chapter name. So we have a great name here, which is the important chapter. This is the newly created chapter that we are creating with this option. So we can also make any changes that we want to make using the Word Import Wizard settings, like configure headings, styles, other setting, table settings.
Everything applies still.
Yes. So the only real difference here is what it does, of course, but also this additional chapter name menu.
Exactly. And if we update the structure, we'll still see the structure as expected. Boop. But now we don't see pagination after chapters because they all feed into the same chapter. But in general, it's the same thing. And if we import, like so, bingo, now we will see that we have a new chapter. We can actually see it up here, but we haven't reloaded yet. So let's reload. Boop. And now we'll see the important chapter with the page structure we expected, and also we'll see some extra table of content. Remember, now it's everything in one. But all of it is now just pulled into web manuals. And the cool thing is we have an idea of what we get before we even import it, giving the control to you. That's the Word Import Wizard for you. We hope you enjoy it. But before we move on, Hedvig, what's your favorite feature in this?
Well, like I said, actually, the guest headings from TUC. I think
you actually said,
yeah,
you mentioned a lot of favorites. That's why I want to nail it down to one.
No, that is my favorite because it just makes it, well, if you have a Word document that maybe you didn't have the import of web manuals in mind, you just kind of made it how you needed it in the moment. And now you don't have to go through and edit it. You can just use our Word Import Wizard and have it right in the system and hopefully correct.
It's an incredible amount of time saved when it hits right. I would say mine is probably the styles. I love the fact that you can take something you've created in a different system and actually ensure that it comes in correctly, and you're able to continue working with it. I think that is so neat. And of course, our favorites are probably what we see as the major time savers.
Yeah.
We're really looking forward to seeing what your favorite is. Now, I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, you are now a Word Import Wizard, Stefan.
Ooh, nice. And now you can be too.